Okay, so here we go. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Thursday Facebook Live, which is on Friday this week. So just catch everybody off guard, mix things up a little bit. Anyway, so I'm Laura Hunter from Drop the Leash Dog Training, and I'm here with Celeste Gagnon, also from Drop the Leash Dog Training. And today we are here to give you some training tips. So what is I'll let you read them out, Celeste, because I'm trying to read this off my phone and deal with the 60-mile-an-hour window here.
Okay.
What is our first one?
Decide on your criteria.
Okay. So that sounds very sciencey. So deciding on your criteria in plain terms just means it's trainer speak for figuring out exactly what you want your dog to do instead of what they're doing now. All right. And a lot of it's very hard sometimes for people to tell us exactly what they want their dog to do instead. And often dog owners get a little fixated on what they don't want their dog to do. But our dogs don't know what that looks like. It's really hard to explain to a dog what it means not to do something. They're pretty black and white and real life. So, let me give you some examples. Leave it. So if I'm out in the back paddock with my dogs, we have lots of horse poop out there, and I say leave it, does that mean to my dogs don't pick up the horse poop? No, because they wouldn't understand that. I'm pretty sure it means to them, lift your head up off the ground and come running back to me and get a cookie. I'm pretty sure that's what leave it means. It's almost interchangeable with recall, I guess. I was talking to somebody the other day who's worried about the puppy running out the door. So if you are trying to teach your puppy not to go out the door, what does that look like? Are they just supposed to hover inside the house? No, they wouldn't understand that. So probably means either lie down on a mat or park your rear end on the stairs in the hallway and stay there, hold that position while I open the door. And what was my third example? Loose leash walking. And this is one that I always ponder because, can we say to our dogs, I'm sorry, you're not supposed to go the extra 2 feet and hit the end of the leash. Pretty sure dogs don't know what the extra 2 feet is even about. So instead, what loose leash walking should look like, instead of don't hit the end of the leash, it should look like hang out somewhere in this little area around me while we are walking. And lastly, jumping up. It doesn't mean don't try and get that person's face, which is what they're doing. It probably means 4 feet on the ground, either or sit or lie down and hold position. So the criteria is a more positive way to think about it. And it's actually more specific as well. So just not doing something, the descriptions I gave you were more specific than just don't do that. So we have to change our mindset to what would we like our dog to do instead. And I think that makes life easier for both the dogs who are trying to figure out what not to do and for the people. So, yeah. All right, next one.
Have realistic expectations. Start with what the dog can do.
Yes. So again, we're not being critical about any of this. These are just things that we see when we have people here in classes or when our students call us. And I think in this case, people often tend to start with the final behavior. Often think about training the final behavior. So, in the case of door dashing, I think a lot of people think that their dog should just sit on the steps and they're just going to walk over and open the door and the dog is going to stay on the steps. But there's a lot of steps before you get to the final behavior. And really, if you're trying to train a puppy not to door dash, how long realistically can a puppy sit when you throw open the door to Disneyland? And I always talk about the outdoors as being Disneyland. So is it realistic to start off trying to teach your puppy to sit on the steps while you go throw that door open? No, not at all. Same with greeting, new people, whether it's a puppy or just a really social adult dog. How many social dogs do you know that can contain themselves when greeting one of their favorite people? Why do you and Rosie come to mind? Because Rosie sees you on the weekend and when you show up here, and am I going to get Rosie to sit quietly beside me when she sees you? Absolutely not. She's pretty much on your head for the first 15 seconds or so. So I could train that. I could teach her not to do that, but I would certainly have to start at a much easier, something easier than just calling her away from you as she's about to launch. So we'd probably have to start on a leash with some sort of high value, lots of high value for just sitting there and looking at you. So, it's the same thing. But I'm trying to think of another example. Recalls. Recalls a big one because people want their dog to recall right away. I'm going to call my dog. They should recall. But your dog might recall to you in the backyard if they're just poking their nose in the garden or something. But they are definitely not going to give you a recall from a squirrel right away. You're going to have to spend a fair bit of time and effort building up to the squirrel for sure.
Yeah.
I can't think of any others. Can you think of, you got any others up your sleeve?
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, just about anything. People see tricks or see well-behaved dogs and they want that immediately. Always.
Yes. You know
you
what's a good point?
the end point. You never realize what gets put into it before that.
Yes.
And
Actually,
we're impatient.
yes. And when you said that, people watching other dogs and that brings to mind agility, because we all know that Rosie can run pretty serious distance in agility. And I have people who get a little frustrated seeing that because they think, wow, I've got an Aussie Shepherd. They should be running that same kind of distance. But they forget that we've been working on that for 8 years.
Yeah.
We just didn't get that
even classmates in the same group. Some will progress because they put the work in when they get home. They do more practicing. Yeah. And they come back the next week and they're like ahead of the group and everybody's like, why? Yeah. I'm in the same class.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So there's a little shout out to any of our agility people who are watching, because all of the jump skills are on the agility page. So you guys can go off and start practicing for sure. Yeah. And, eventually your dog will get to that point that you want them to, but you've got to break it down. You've got to make it easier for them. You've got to you've got to understand that, if you want your puppy to sit, on the stairs in the hallway, you have to build massive value for sit, which most people don't bother to do. Because we just ask our dogs to sit. They sit, but they don't always hold position. And, you have to build that up a little bit at a time. So you eventually you'll get there, but, puppies and excited dogs, it's very, very hard for them to hold all those positions that we want to. And with the young dogs in the beginning, we say it's much easier to give them a really fun alternative behavior that involves some motion, because dogs were designed to move and motion is motivating for them. So, instead of chasing the squirrel or instead of sitting calmly and watching the squirrel run across the backyard, chase me instead. Let's you and I play chase, or here, I'm going to throw some food out on the ground and you can chase that and get it. And then when you look back at me, I'll throw you some more, which is what we do. So, if you're looking for immediate results, you're going to have to come up with something that is super exciting right away for your dog. Something that isn't just sit and look. That's definitely for down the road. All right.
I want to add something to that too.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking of it as we were talking. To have realistic expectations and starting what the dog can do, that can be flipped around to starting what you can do too. Because we have a lot of, I'm thinking of our reactive class, let's say, dog classes, where we know what the end result's going to be or want to be. And we want to get our dog there and we kind of try to speed through it because we want to get there faster. but the person doesn't have the skills either that the dog can understand.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
I mean, we have our own limits as well. And we need those baby steps just as much as the dog sometimes.
Yes. Yes. That's right. You are always the person that thinks about the people. I'm the person that thinks about the dog. That's why we go well together, Celeste. Together, we cover the whole team.
We have the
Yeah, I
spectrum.
wouldn't thought of that. That's a really good point. Is that especially in the reactive program, is they have to have the confidence and the skills.
Yeah.
And as soon as the people have the confidence and the skills, it goes faster for the dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great point. All right. What do we have next?
All right. Do we do the everyone wants the default sit and hold position?
Yeah, I think so.
That's kind of covered, eh? Have a plan.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, no one ever has a plan.
I think the concept of the plan is not something that people would think about right away.
No. And before I went to Jean Donaldson's Academy, I never trained with a plan. I'm sure I just sat there and thought, hey, what do I want my dog to do in the long run? And just tried to teach from what I was just talking about. I'm sure I just tried to teach the entire behavior. It was almost like starting backwards. And then I went to, as I said, I went to Jean Donaldson's Academy, and that was what it was all about, is writing up training plans. And God, I hated training plans. I hated in the beginning writing up training plans. Oh God, I hated it. And now I'm sure that Jean Donaldson is not listening to us today, but thank you anyway, Jean Donaldson. If there's somebody out there could pass that on to her, I'm very grateful. And I'll confess, I don't sit down at the table and write out training plans for my dogs. I do a lot for my students, but it is a really good idea, because once you've decided where you want to get to, what you want to do, you really do need to have a plan to get there. And so a plan keeps you on track, and it keeps you organized, and it makes you think about it before you get into it with the dog and make a whole bunch of mistakes, which is what I used to do. And you're not going to, if you have a plan, chances are, we'll see, you might start to train in smaller increments, which is much better to do. And even if you do start and the increments are too big, and we'll talk about that later, you can look at your plan and go, oh, maybe I could put another step in here. So you are more logical and organized when you have a plan, which is probably why I hated it, because I would always I just like to fly by the seat of my pants a lot. But it is good to have it, and it is really good to write it down. Because if you write it down and it's all there in front of you in black and white, and oh God, she used to say to us over and over and over again, and I never got it. I just thought it was a big pain, and now I totally get it. Here I am telling my guys to do it, because if you have a plan and it's in front of you, you don't have to stop in the middle of your training session and go, oh my God, why did that go wrong? What am I supposed to do next? I forgot, I had a thought, or I just don't know what to do. So it lets you just go ahead and train without having to worry about planning. Just you go through the steps, and it's much smoother, and it really is. And I'm sure everybody out there is going, we're not going to do that, that's a pain. But trust me, it is a really great idea. So maybe I could give you an example. So again, I'll go back to the door dashing, because a lot of people have mentioned door dashing to me lately. Maybe through COVID, dogs are, there's the people, maybe dogs and people
are door dashing.
The door. As soon as the door opens, there's this mad stampede. But anyway, what I would, that would be a big plan, because first of all, I would teach my puppy to hold position. Sit her down, I don't care. Well, I started to get away from them in small increments. All right. And you probably don't need huge increments for a door plan. You don't have to go that far. And then what I would probably do is start by just taking a step or two towards the door, and then coming back and reinforcing, and maybe 3 or 4 steps towards the door and come back and reinforce. And then maybe I get all the way to the door and come back and reinforce. And then I would move to, actually grabbing the knob, turning the handle, opening the door a few inches. So, those all seem like really, really tiny steps. And it seems like, oh my God, who has the patience and who really wants to do this? But you and I both know that if you go slow and you break it down into really easy steps in the beginning, it's going to go faster in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people don't know that, or they'll just have to take it on faith from us, I think.
It's true.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
It's now in the internet. It's true.
It's on the internet.
Yeah,
It's true. Oh, that's too much responsibility for us. No, everybody to take everything with a grain of salt, please. We're just here, just putting our opinions out. Okay, so what do we have? Oh, I know, it leads into the next one, I think. I wrote this so it would stick to the next one.
Yeah. Take your time and build for success.
That's right. Because so we all learn more effectively if we are successful. If we're successful and somebody's reinforcing us for being successful, we're going to get more good stuff. We're going to be more motivated. We're just going to feel better because we're not making mistakes all the time. Mm-hmm. So again, if you go through those small incremental steps and the dog is always successful, that motivation and all of that reinforcement is going to keep the dog in the game. And a human analogy. Let's take tennis as a human analogy. So you're going to tennis lessons and somebody's going to try and teach you how to do a serve in tennis. I know this because I used to play a lot of tennis. Nobody can, unless you're naturally gifted, nobody's going to figure out how to execute a decent serve in tennis right away, because it's pretty tough skill. So, if your instructor just tells you, just throw the ball up in the air and hit it, well, most of us aren't going to get it right. So they need to teach how to stand properly, how to hold the racket properly, throw the ball to the right height, and then take that away and learn how to swing the racket and then try and put them together. It's complicated. And, any good human instructor knows that you have to break things down to the level at which somebody can learn them. Some of us, some of us learn more easily. We can jump through more steps or take bigger steps. Other people need tiny, tiny increments. So we do that with people, but we don't think about doing it with the dog. Everybody just wants to run to the final product with the dog, so if a dog hasn't been able to hold still in less distracting situations and easier situations, they haven't been reinforced for it, there's no way on God's green earth they're going to be able to stay where they are when somebody flings the front door open. So we need to break it down just like we do for humans, Yeah, well,
so, even more really, because at least with your tennis instructor, you're both speaking the same language. You know what the end result's meant to be. With your dog, they have no idea what you're doing or why.
You're right. Absolutely. Because they don't speak English. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And they don't think like we do at all. Yeah. Yeah. So, let's just move on. I think we talk about that in a little bit anyway. So, I think I also wanted to talk about what you do. I didn't put in as a question, Celeste, or a heading. What you do when your dog makes mistakes. So, sorry, I'm just checking to see if we're doing this in the right order here.
You are.
Yeah. So we, again, good old Jean Donaldson, she had a very specific way of us handling the mistakes, in that if your dog, so say you're taking your dog out in the backyard and you're going to do some sort of training, and something simple, and you're going to do some repetitions. So it's always a good idea to do about 5 repetitions, because that's easier for us to remember. And your dog gets 5 out of 5. Then you move on to the next step. If your dog can only do 3, we were taught to do what we call a stick, which means, yeah, that's pretty good, but just to make sure you've got it right, we're going to do it over again, because you got half of them right. So let's just do it again to make sure that you get all of them right, and we can reinforce you more. And if dog can only do one or two, then what we want to do at that point is make it easier. We want to either go back to the first step, or try and come up with a previous step, or try and come up with something in between that the dog has a chance of getting right. And again, we do that so they can learn through success, so we can reinforce them, because if they're making a lot of mistakes and we're not reinforcing them, it's not going to go anywhere. It definitely isn't going to go anywhere at all. So, yeah.
And to jump back to what we talked about earlier, this works really well with the plan that you wrote out.
Yeah.
You know exactly what step to go back to.
Yeah. And sometimes, you might look at the plan and insert another step in between and see if that works. That's perfectly fine too. But at least you've got some sort of organizational, plan to follow. And, there's a lot of people, we've talked about this in other Facebook Lives. There's a whole concept out there of errorless learning. And there's a lot of people out in dog world there's a bit of controversy over it. Some people say, yes, errorless learning is fantastic. Dogs, we want them to be motivated. We want them to build through success. And then there are trainers who say, yes, but dogs need to make mistakes and be resilient and move on from their mistakes. I'm kind of in the middle on that. I always like to set up my training so that my dogs aren't going to make mistakes, but because I am only human, and probably because I didn't write a plan up, and it's not there in front of me, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes anyway, because I'm technically probably not that great a trainer. So we always make mistakes. So it's never going to be errorless learning. Our dogs are always going to have to learn to deal with us and just put up with us. Agility comes to mind, because it's like golf. we're never going to get where we want to go, and we're always making mistakes in agility. And your dogs are fairly forgiving, so when my dogs turn around and bark at me like I'm an idiot, I just say to them, I'm sorry, I'm doing the best I can, you'll just have to deal with this. And so they learn to deal with it. We see a lot of that in agility. So
and it comes from us as well.
Exactly.
I know I do that sometimes. All right, which leads us to own the mistake.
Yes, and that's what I was just talking about, is that we are going to make mistakes, and we need to own those mistakes, because our dogs aren't being stupid, they're not lazy, they're not stubborn, they're not, what does everybody tell me? Oh, they only do it when they feel like doing it, or they only do it in their own time. For anybody who holds those sort of opinions, my answer is a famous phrase. Everybody has this famous phrase: your dog can only work with the information you are giving it. We say that a lot in agility. So if they are making a mistake, that was probably miscommunication of some sort on your part, or a failure to reinforce at the right time. So there's two reasons that dogs don't respond the way you want them to, and none of the above are in this category. It's either what we call a what problem. So you're training too fast, you're jumping ahead too quickly, or the increments from one step to the other is too big a step for the dog. You're maybe skipping steps, or you're giving your dog confusing instructions. And we all do that. I had a big moment with Annie last summer. Obviously, it was a big moment because I'm still thinking about it 9 months later, where I was trying to work on impulse control exercise with her, and she wasn't getting it right at all. And I was getting frustrated with her, and I thought, man, why isn't she getting this? She can't control herself. This is, she should be better than this at this point in her training. And I became really frustrated, and I gave her time out because we both had to calm down. And then I kind of whacked myself upside the head a few times and went back. And went back to the beginning and broke it down and smaller steps. And she got the entire activity within 10 minutes. And I'd spent like 2 days trying to work on the first few steps with her. She got the whole thing in 10 minutes. And that was completely and utterly my fault, because I was just asking her to start at like a level 12, and she was, needed to be in at level 1 or 2 or 3 and go from there. So it's really easy to have too high an expectation for our dog, especially when it's our own dogs. Tell me if this holds true for you. Like, I have 3, and my expectations for Annie are far higher than my expectations for the other 2. She's the one I'm most attached to. Maybe that has something to do with it. Our emotions get caught in there. So I'm always harder on her than I am on the other 2. The other 2, I can just, be totally neutral with them. I don't know. You ever found that with Penny and Gimli?
Yeah, I think I expect more from Penny than Gimli, because she, to me, is the serious working one, and Gimli's a goofball. Although I know he's got as big a brain as she does.
Yes.
I don't expect as much from him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting point, because there are a lot of us here that have working dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be interesting to know if we aren't the only ones that expect more from our working dogs. Because Annie is definitely, of the 3, she's the worker bee of the 3.
Yeah.
So I expect her to jump ahead a lot faster. It'd be interesting to know. Maybe we could do a little poll this week.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Herding dogs. Maybe if there's anybody out there with a herding dog, you could weigh in on this. Or not just a herding dog, but a working dog.
Any working line dog, yeah.
Yeah, any working line dog. So that's your what problem, is that your dog just doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing, or they're not capable at that point of doing it. And the other problem is a why problem. And that is, there's just not enough incentive for your dog in that situation. Everybody talks to us about, dogs are great in the house, but as soon as we take them out in the yard or out the front door, it all falls apart. Well, it is much, much harder for your dog to listen to you because of the distractions in the world. Mm-hmm. So they can't focus. Not only that, the world is offering them far more reinforcement than you are at this point. So you've got to make it easier for them, and you probably have to provide at that point a higher value reward for them, a reinforcer, I should say. I think that leads into our next point again too, which is my favorite one of all.
Pay, and pay some more.
Exactly. Yes, it is. I'm a food junkie. People should spend a day with me and watch how much food that gets tossed to my dogs. Yours too, So that is the $1 million question. Are you offering enough food or enough reinforcement? It's not always food. Right. It's whatever your dog thinks is reinforcing. I've got one who was not really a food dog for a long time. She worked for Frisbees and balls. That's perfectly fine. So are you offering enough value for the alternative behavior you want your dog to give you? And dogs are really good at figuring out the economic value of stuff. They have their own little economy. And, there are a lot of behaviors that are cheap for dogs. By cheap, I mean, it doesn't cost them anything to give us that behavior. If you ask your dog to sit, what dog doesn't sit? Actually, Rosie. Rosie's the only dog I know that doesn't sit. Never has, never will. But most dogs, we started training them sit when they're puppies. You say sit, they sit. Easy, cheap. You don't have to reinforce the sit all the time. But if you're talking about recalls or loose leash walking, and sometimes even just focus and attention, those are expensive behaviors, especially recall, because your dog often has to give something up of real value to them in order to give you what you want. You know, if your dog's out there chasing a squirrel, my God, that's so much value. And you want them to come back to you, and probably not for anything as much fun at that point. Or, you know, if they want to go out on a walk and sniff, and there's all sorts of stuff out there, and they want to pull on the leash to get to that, but you're saying, oh no, you have to walk beside me. Those are expensive behaviors. So you have to offer equal pay for equal work. Really, it works for humans and it works for dogs. And, you know, again, we tend to have a double standard here. We're stingy with dogs. Well, I'm not. Just one thing you can't fault me for is being stingy with my dogs. But a lot of people, you know, we've seen it down in the field when we're working in the games classes, and we say to people, pay, pay, pay. And the dog comes running back from the other dogs and great recall, and people hand it one piece of food. You know, I'm sure your dog's going to look at you and say, wow, you're cheap. You're really cheap, man. And will they come back the next time? Who knows?
Or will they stay? They come back, grab the treat, and take off again.
Yeah, and we talked about that grab and go dog. Yeah, not here. I'm coming in. I grabbed it. Nothing worth hanging around for. I'm off to the squirrel again. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, we're either stingy for some reason, or we want the dog to do it for other reasons, because they should, or because they love us. And I really like to think when my dogs come flying back to me, I look at them and I go, oh my God, you guys really love me. Look at you flying back. I know I'm delusional, and I know they're flying back because I have a treat pouch and it's full of stuff. But, you know, we all want to think that they're coming back because they love us, but it really doesn't work that way. They love the treat pouch. That's okay. It's okay. We're okay.
They love
with that.
you carry the treat pouch. You're in there somewhere.
Yeah, we don't have baby girls. It's reality. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. So pay. All right. What's next?
Consistency and management.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one too.
Okay. Yeah. First tenet of any training session is just prevent the dog from doing what you don't want them to do. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we've talked about this before, is that, you know, what's management? Management is leashes, long lines. In case of reactive dogs, sometimes it can be muzzles, you know, doors. Any boundary is really, I always think of management as being boundaries. So you set a boundary up so that the dog can't access the situation and go ahead and practice that behavior. Because we have to remember that if they are, you know, if they keep repeating these behaviors that we don't want them to, they have a reason. Either it's really reinforcing or there's an actual need for it. And after a year of puppy classes, biting does come to mind. You know, we definitely don't want the puppies to reinforce, you know, to practice biting, which becomes reinforced and they keep on biting us. But, you know, we don't want to punish them for it either because we know that they can't help it. So we use a boundary. We put them in a crate and we give them something really great to chew on so that they can learn that alternative behavior. So, you know, people are always saying they're biting me. And I say, well, all you can do really is put them in the crate to prevent it, you know. And the big one for me is recall, you know, because that is, I think that if no other skill out there needs management, recall needs management. Because if you're not, if you're teaching your dog a recall and you're not on, they're not on a long line or in a contained area, and they take off and end up chasing a squirrel or jump in the lake or, you know, find something great to roll in, you're already fighting an uphill battle with your recall. So we want to prevent our dogs from thinking that they can just freely access everything in the world until we have been able to build up so much value for a recall, they choose us over anything else. So, people often say to me, oh my gosh, my dog got out the door and they took off across the road. I thought they were going to get run over, or they disappeared into the forest. What do I do? And then the first thing I say is put them back on a long line. It happened once with Annie, and she chased a cat from the front of the arena right down Vandorf, and she was like halfway to Highway 48 before she sort of snapped out of it and came back. I put her back on a long line for 6 months and just worked that. There's nothing wrong with that. But when I tell people put them back on a long line, people are reluctant to do that. Your dog doesn't have to be, what was the expression I heard the other day? Dogs need to be wild and free. They don't. They need to be safe. And so definitely you don't want to ruin recall training, because that is what's going to keep your dog safe in the long run. So yeah, that's definitely a good example of management for sure. All right, I think we've got one more to go.
You have to keep practicing and reinforcing.
Yeah, because habits and intrinsically motivating behaviors, they take a long time to change. We all know how hard it is to change our habits. I'm sure as a result of the last year, people have developed different habits, which they like to go, change back to their other way of life. And we're going to have a hard time doing that. So again, we're asking our dogs not only to change a habit, but we're asking them to give up stuff that is really motivating for them in exchange for something that's not so intrinsically motivating. And the other thing too is our dogs have the mental and emotional capacity of 3-year-olds. At some point, we teach our kids, and eventually our kids get it. Hopefully, eventually our children all learn to say thank you by the time they're, 20 years old, and we don't have to keep reminding them. But dogs are 3-year-olds, and they're not going to grow up and mature. So we do have to keep reminding them, and we do have to keep reinforcing them and practicing the behaviors. And if we don't practice those behaviors, if they're not reinforced, they are going to disappear. So we have to maintain, and we have to be pretty diligent about maintaining those behaviors. So that is, and it's easy to think, oh, I've got a 3 or 4-year-old dog, I don't have to practice recalls anymore. But I still practice recalls with my dogs. They're 8 and 10, but we still, and you do too. Your guys aren't as old, but we're still working on all those behaviors we want every single day. So anyway, I think that covers all of our tips. So
It does.
Yeah, we'll just reiterate on them. You can, if you want to look and see, Celeste, if anybody's asking questions, and I'll just go through these really quickly again so everybody knows. Number 1, decide on exactly what you want your dog to do, which is deciding on your criteria and be very specific about it. Number 2, have realistic expectations. Start with what the dog can do, not with what you want the dog to do in the long run. Number 3, have a plan. Write your plan down until at least you get into the habit of having a plan in your head. Write it down in the beginning. Number 4, take your time and build for success. Train in incremental sessions. If the dog makes mistakes, go back to an easier one to build up their motivation and their confidence. Number 3, I don't know what number 1, own the mistakes, because my famous quote, the dog can only work with the information you are giving it. And pay some more, and be consistent. Actually, we missed one, and it's a big one. So I'll just throw that one in here.
Consistency. We did miss that one.
Well, we did consistency in management, but we also have to be consistent in how we ask the dogs. And we know this. This one comes up a lot in our reactive classes, because we tend to think that when we work with a dog in one situation, that the dog will totally understand that we are asking the thing in a different situation. But dogs are really, really context specific. So when we ask our dog to sit in front of us in the kitchen, that's exactly what the dog thinks. I think people forget that dogs don't understand English.
Mhm.
So we say sit, the dog sits in front of us in the kitchen, and we think, okay, if we go out in the world and we say sit, they know what sit means. But all the dog is hearing is some weird noise coming out of our mouth. And that weird noise means that I should sit in front of Laura in the kitchen and look at her. And so if we go out in the world and make that weird noise again, I'm sure that dog's going to connect that to a sit. That's way too generalized for our dogs to get that. And like we have to start thinking that dogs are so specific. Even we know this from training, is that dogs sit in front of us and we teach them the cue sit. And then if the dog is beside us and you ask the dog to sit, the dog doesn't necessarily sit.
Right.
So, and then people mix their words up. So people will say sit, teach the dog to sit everywhere. And then one day you say sit and the dog doesn't sit and you go sit down or sit now. And the dog's going, oh my God, there's two strange noises coming from your mouth. What does that mean? So we know that from the reactive dog program, because it's really important in our reactive dog program, that use of the word yes, but we often hear people adding other things to the yes cue.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't help the dog. It just distracts the dog and confuses them. So we have to be very consistent in our explanations and our information and our cues. And then finally, last one, you have to keep practicing and reinforcing the behavior you want for a long time, because it takes habits a long time to change, and you're asking your dog to give up some really good stuff for stuff that isn't so much fun. And they're eternal children. So, if we had a 3-year-old for your entire life, you'd probably still be doing a lot of work with them, 10 years down the road, if they stayed for, if they became 3 years old for 10 years. That doesn't make any sense, but you know what I'm trying to get to. Right? Dogs do not grow up and think, oh, look at all the stuff I learned. Now let me take it out in the world and use it. They just
they're always dependents.
Yes, they're always dependent on us for guidance and reinforcement and motivation. Yeah. Okay. So
if people want more on that, keep practicing and reinforcing, they can listen to last week's live about why to keep training.
Yes, that's right. We did that last week. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's lots of good stuff in there. There are no questions.
Okay. That's obviously, our explanations were so incredibly clear and valuable that nobody needs to ask questions.
Or everybody's having a late lunch.
Yes, or they got tired of listening to us. That as well. So I have just done something really weird here with my screen. Have I disappeared?
No, you're good. You're good on my end.
Okay, well, I've done something. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I hit a wrong button. So anyway, if anybody has any questions or you want to put anything in the comments about any of this, make any comments, please do, and we'll be glad to answer those, read them and answer them. And thank you, everybody, for coming out and listening to us today. If you're around next week, hopefully we'll come up with another live for next week. If there's anything specific that anybody wants us to talk about, put that in comments as well. We come up with these topics on our own because it's stuff that we like to talk about. But if anybody's looking for anything specific, we'd be happy to address that as well. So thanks, Celeste, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody. And hopefully we'll see you next week. So everybody have a good week and stay safe.